shoes, world on my shoulders, a heart full of blues out in the dirt, down in the dirt. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night, starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt. Been real bad boy. I've been a real bad boy on the town all night, starting to calm down with the morning light. I'm in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt, down in the dirt.
This is eCommerceaholic. My name is TJ Gamble, CEO and founder of Jamerson, an e-commerce agency dedicated to helping you get more from your e-commerce store, and your host for this conversation. Today, we're going to talk about how to achieve sub-second page load times with Ajay Kapur, CEO and co-founder of Moovweb. But first, I'm going to pour myself a little bit of this Knob Creek 12 right here while you listen to a word from our sponsor, Mage Mojo. The following broadcast is sponsored by Mage Mojo. And I want to take a minute and talk about Magento hosting, because Magento hosting is a lot like hauling stuff in my Tundra here. It's about having a tool that is sized properly for the job. This Tundra's great if I'm on the farm and I want to tow something like my old pickup truck here. But what if I wanted to tow something bigger, like, say, a space shuttle? Well, then this just isn't the right tool for the job.
We know this because Toyota did it. This is a publicity stunt to show how awesome this truck is. And sure, it's pulling it, but look at how slow it is. Those people on foot are literally having to slow down to not pass this thing.
And that's a lot like Magento in that you need a proper hosting environment. I've been doing Magento as long as Magento's been doing Magento, and in all of that time, I've never seen somebody who can build a site to overcome improper hosting. And with increasing customer demands, slow is just not acceptable. Mage Mojo understands the needs of Magento merchants because they focus only on Magento hosting, and they've built a reputation as a premier Magento hosting provider. They've built an incredible Magento cloud hosting platform so that their customers enjoy the speed, reliability, and scalability of cloud servers. And if you geek out about technical details, ask them about how they provide automatic horizontal scaling for free. With cloud hosting from Mage Mojo, there's no more worrying about flash sales or Cyber Monday traffic. If you operate a Magento store, then you need to check out Mage Mojo Hosting. The link is in the description of this live stream, or you can just go to magemojo.com. That's magemojo.com. Thank you for joining us today. As always, this is a live Q&A, so post your questions and we'll get around to them as fast as we possibly can. It's a casual conversation, so we're just going to kind of meander through the conversation and mix in your questions as we go. Page speed is a huge factor in e-commerce conversions, and it doesn't get much faster than sub 1 second page loads. I mean, you just can't beat instantaneous. So let's just dive into it. Ajay, if you would, introduce yourself and tell us a little more about Moovweb.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, TJ. Thanks for having me. First off, I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, today we are going to talk about really fast sites. Sites that are so fast, they're basically instantaneous. They load in the blink of an eye. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Moovweb. We are infrastructure that delivers sub-second websites, and we work with amazing brands. About $10 billion of e-commerce goes through our platform every year, and we power great brands like United Airlines, 1-800-Flowers, Coach.com, and KateSpade.com, Revolve Fashion. So a bunch of really great big e-commerce sites, and then hundreds of others, smaller brands, some of whom you probably haven't heard of. The commonality for all of those that are on our latest platform is that they have these guaranteed sub-second speeds, these instantaneous speeds that are just really just a joy to use these experiences. So, we'll talk a lot more about that. That's a little bit about the company, and really excited to be here.
Yes, definitely going to be a fun conversation. So let's just kind of start off diving into a little more about what you do at Moovweb. When you say you power, like, what are we talking about? Are you a hosting company? What do you mean by power these websites?
That's a great question. So we're like a CDN. So we can replace your CDN, your content delivery network. So content delivery network, it's like an Akamai or a CloudFront, Cloudflare, Fastly. It's that layer that sits on top of the e-commerce platform that's used to accelerate images and other things like that. Now, we're very different. We're not a CDN. Our product is called Moovweb XDN. It's an experience delivery network. It does so much more than a CDN. It's kind of like, there used to be digital cameras as a separate standalone thing that a lot of people would buy. Then the iPhone came out. And the iPhone it had a digital camera, but it did so much more. That's what the XDN is. It does so much more than a CDN, but it has a CDN inside of it. Now, once you have an XDN, you don't need a CDN anymore. And so we're one of those companies, and there's a number of other companies out there. One is called Vercel, another is called Netlify. There's Moovweb, the XDN. We are companies that are coming in and saying, hey, there's this different layer here. It's tuned for speed. It can replace your CDN, and it'll sit on top of your e-commerce platform. It'll sit on top of some native custom-built type of platform that you built yourself. And it's that layer that sits on top, and it delivers that front end. It's the thing that delivers and brings the front end to the edge of the network. And in our case, we bring the data into the browser 5 seconds before you even tap on anything.
All right, keep your questions coming in the chat. We'll get around to those in just a second. I want to get through some initial questions, and then we will come back to your questions. Keep them coming. I see them in there, and I appreciate you asking them. So you had mentioned, let's define CDN first, if you would, just to make sure, all levels of e-commerce entrepreneurs understand the conversation that we're dealing with. If you would, define a CDN and maybe go into a little more about what a traditional CDN is.
Yeah, so a traditional CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. So when you say content, what is that typically talking about? It's talking about images on your website, videos on your website, and then the code of your website. So what's the code? The code is usually JavaScript, CSS, and some other pieces of your website. What the Content Delivery Network does is it takes that content, and instead of it, every time a browser comes and hits your website, you have to go all the way back to wherever your hosting is, wherever your servers are. Usually your hosts are in one part of the country. What the CDN does is it takes that content and it puts it in every city, every major city around the globe, so that the time it takes to actually receive that content if you're on a browser is just a lot shorter, because it's sitting in the city that you're at. It's not going all the way back to wherever you happen to be hosting your website. So some of you guys might have a content delivery network but not know it. So for example, if you use Shopify has built into it a content delivery network, and it uses they use a variety of them, but I think the main one they use is one called Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is a CDN, and they're a company. The other CDNs, I mentioned some of them. One is called Fastly, one's called Akamai. It's implicit that the images that you serve when you load them into Shopify are going to be in the various important cities, in the big cities, so that they're closer to the customers when you happen to use Shopify. And so Shopify uses this thing called a CDN to go achieve that.
So you had mentioned specifically that you have an XDN that has additional functionality over a CDN. Could you give us some examples of what additional functionality you have that a CDN wouldn't have?
Yeah, look, the most important thing is that we'll make this website instant. So, CDNs were developed. Akamai was created maybe 20 years ago now. And Akamai was created for those, those older websites with not a lot of images, a lot of text, and a lot of, GIF animations and small things bouncing around the page. But it wasn't designed for these like modern e-commerce applications. These are websites, but they're like applications.
Right.
So if you think about it, the content delivery networks were originally created to create fast websites, yet most e-commerce sites aren't that fast. In fact, if you look at Google and you look at their data, they, year over year, even though mobile networks and other things are getting faster, websites, especially when they're mobile, are staying at the same speeds, usually around 3 to 5 seconds per page load. So every time you go and you're in a category and then you click on the product page to learn something more, then you realize, hey, I'm not that interested in that dress. Let me go to the next one. You hit the back button and you keep doing that sort of thing. Each time you're doing that, you're getting a white screen. You're getting the content to show up. It bounces around the page a little bit. And that hasn't gotten any better, even though every website typically has a CDN. So ironically, even though the CDN was built to make websites faster, websites aren't actually fast. And so what the XDN does, the first thing it does, it actually makes the website fast. So it sounds super simple, but if you go play with the average website, it's not fast. Almost every website has a CDN in it, and we make it fast. Now we can talk a bit about how that works, but that's step one.
Yeah,
There's other stuff that it does.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, a fast website versus not a fast website is a result, not a tool or some step you're doing. So what do you do differently from a CDN to be better?
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'll get into some of those details. Now, the first thing that if you go, so I'm sure anyone who's listening here has been contacted by Google and is watching Google and talking about, hey, understanding why they're concerned with site speed, and you guys are thinking, hey, what do I need to do to improve it? And usually if you go to one of Google's tools, you'll get this list of things to optimize for your website, right? And if you're a smaller company, or even if you're a bigger company, usually it's pretty hard to find those engineers who come in and optimize all those things on the website. And even when you do it, we even work with companies who have faster websites than, say, Nike.com and Amazon.com, where they have not only a person, but a whole team working on optimizing a website. The thing with what everyone's trying to do in the market is that when you tap on a link on a website, let's say it's a product page, they focus on speeding up everything after that tap. So that list of things that you get to speed up your website, it could be like, optimize your images, or, remove the render blocking JavaScript. And it gets into a lot of little details about what you need to do. It's all about everything you do after the tap. So we had this insight. We said, hey, the network in the browser is kind of sitting idle there before you tap. So what if we did this? What if we took the data that you needed to render that page in your browser, and we put it into the browser 5 seconds before you tap, and just use all that idle time to put in all the pages you might tap. So we'll go predict that if you're on a category page, you're most likely to go visit certain pages in the certain product pages there. Let's get the data for all those pages and put it in the browser before the tap. So when the shopper, when she clicks on one of those products, it shows up basically instantaneously. And what I want you guys to do is you should go to something like thetiebar.com. It's a really cool site. If there's time later, I'm going to actually try to show it in the camera here.
Is that TIE?
Browser on it.
The TIE bar? All right, I'll post it in the
TIE.
chat so people can access it.
Yeah, you should play around with it on your smartphone. We'll power the whole experience, but obviously the phone is where you tend to get that lag there. So
right.
What do we do? So the thing we did is we said, basically, let's focus on using the network and the browser before the tap to fill up, have all that content get into the browser 5 seconds before you need it, and then when you tap on it, it's basically instantaneous. And I'll tell you this, TJ, these sites, if you play around them, they don't feel like any other e-commerce site that's out there. You can go play with Amazon and Nike, and all these sites where they spend a lot of time tuning for speed, and they don't feel instant. And these sites are basically instant. There's no page load anymore.
Now, we've got a lot to unpack with that already, and we've got some great questions in the chat we're going to get to in a second. So my first question comes from an infrastructure perspective, right? So the first question I'm going to have is that if you are predicting every single page that they might go to, so if they go to page A and there are 30 different places they may go from here, is that adding an additional load on my back-end infrastructure because you're pulling up 20 or 30 pages for every one page load, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and not at all, because what we do is we have the equivalent of a CDN inside of our XDN. What is a CDN? That means we've got almost 100 points around the globe where we go and store that data, and we shield your servers from getting all that traffic. So it is true, like a given browser is going to now act like it's producing the traffic of 10 people, because every time you tap on something, it's going out to essentially 10 pages, and you'll only visit 9 of them, and it's going to go fetch all that. But the beauty is, if I'm sitting here, and I'm in San Francisco right now, our closest edge here is our edge location. Our closest edge location is about 20, 25 miles away. So if I were to show you my phone and we were to go on the Tybar or one of these websites, and we went on a product listing page, it's going to be grabbing those 10 pages, but it's not going to be going all the way up to the origin servers there. It's going to be going to the edge of our network and grabbing the data from there and bringing it down into the browser.
Okay, so as far as, again, kind of how a website should be set up to maximize the impact of Moovweb, are we talking, PWA? Does it work with PWA? Is it only work with PWA? Can I throw my traditionally themed Magento site on there? Like, what kind of setups can I go to Shopify or BigCommerce and have it work with your XDN? Like, what is the ideal setup, and then where are the limits?
Yeah, well, the beauty is it works with all platforms and all types of websites, and so it can work with Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, Oracle Commerce Cloud, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and for each of these different platforms, we've got different customers who are already using it, and so it works with all the platforms. And what it can do two things. If it's more of a traditional style website, we'll still get that data into the browser 5 seconds ahead of the tap. So traditional server-side rendered Magento template, let's say like that, it'll still grab that data and put it in 5 seconds before the tap. Now, sometimes on those websites, you may be doing certain things with that front end that, even though the data's there, the front end is bouncing around because it's not, say, a PWA where that front end is really tuned.
Right.
So what we say is that, look, if you have a PWA or a single page application, SPA as they call it, we're going to guarantee sub-second speeds. And when we talk about speed, we're talking about that paint time. We're talking about when you tap something, it's loading in faster than a second, and then you start browsing around, it's really more like 1 or 2 or 300 milliseconds, which is basically the blink of an eye, a third of a second. So that's, if you have a PWA, we can guarantee those speeds, and we do guarantee those speeds. If you don't have a PWA, you're going to have a way faster site. But is it always going to be sub-second? Sometimes it depends a little bit on how that front end was coded. Some of those front ends, people will do lots of things on it to kind of slow it down, and then you'll just shave a couple seconds off. And in other cases, they haven't done that, and you'll still have a sub-second website, even though you don't have a PWA. So some people are getting the speeds of a PWA without having to go through the pain of creating a PWA when they put the XDN in front of their website.
So, like, the Tybar appears to be a PWA. Like, it looks like it's a React-based application. Do you have any examples of sites using anything that's not PWA? Say, Shopify, BigCommerce, or Magento. Are there any, just to throw you on the spot here on a live stream, do you have any examples of a traditionally themed site that is super fast because of your service?
So we just launched in April the product that works with non-PWAs.
Okay.
So all of those right now are just going through the kind of quick onboarding and other process right now. So there's actually nothing I can show there that shows it. But we do have demo sites that I don't. We have like something called Leaf.com, which is one of the Shopify examples, which is now sub-second. We have the starter offering from Shopify, which is sub-second. And none of these are PWAs. They're just kind of the built-in thing. So what we did is, before we launched the product, we went to the standard templates for BigCommerce, Magento, Shopify, and these really popular ones, and took their standard starter things and made those load in a sub-second way. And all of those are really humming and working great. So, we'd encourage you guys, if you're interested and you don't have a PWA, you can just contact us, email me, Ajay@moovweb.com, or go to go@moovweb.com and email us there. Go to our website, just fill in the form. And we can go, and for some of these websites, it's a really simple setup. Like on Shopify, it's really simple and easy to go, and you just kind of put in an API key and do a few things. And within a few hours, you can have a way faster website, because this data is going to be coming from the edge of the network, streaming into your browser 5 seconds before you tap to keep, and it's your same website with all your features. And it's setting us up is the same as kind of setting up a CDN. You did a little change to your domain name, and you point your domain name to us. That usually takes a few minutes. And then we're sitting in front of your website before it gets to Shopify or whatever your system is.
All right, let's get to some of the questions in the chat here. I'm going to start over on YouTube, because that's where the first questions came in. Tushar, thank you for your question. Tushar's question is, for fast page load on Magento, what's your view on PWAs?
Here's the funny thing about PWAs. They don't actually speed up your website. So what do we do? Like, PWAs on their own don't speed up your website. So what I'll say is this. We went and we ran a crawler, and we crawled the entire Internet Retailer 500, so all 500 websites. And then we measured, are they a PWA or are they a standard website? So most of them are standard websites, about 10-ish% are PWAs. And then we said, what's the speed difference between the two? Turns out there's no speed difference. They both load in about 4 seconds. One is 4.1, the other is 4.2. It was basically a wash. So PWAs on their own on that first load aren't any faster. Now, once you think about speed, I want you to think about, Tushar, about like 2 levels of speed. There's showing up to a website on that first load, which is super important. That's what Google really pays attention to when they rank your site. And then there's browsing around the website. You might go look at 15 products. PWAs are actually better at the browsing speed than a traditional website. So you see the benefit of a PWA once you're in the website and you're browsing around, because PWAs, if you think about it, it's kind of like a native app. That first load isn't that fast, because when you download a native app, you're getting that whole app. You go to the App Store and you have to wait for that thing to download your app. But then once you have the app, it's actually got more code in it already, so that each time you tap around, each load is faster than, say, a website. The PWA is like that, but it's a website. That first load tends to be equal or slower, and then as you browse around, it's slightly faster. And so that's the benefit of a PWA from a speed standpoint. So if you talk about Magento, what I'd say is this. If you're going to use PWA, and they have something called the PWA Studio, so there's a native PWA that you get as part of Magento, you're not going to be getting huge speed improvements just by virtue of using it. Now, if you were to run PWA Studio on the XDN, you certainly are going to have a way faster website. So I think speed, PWAs, I think the original premise was speed, but really what they were talking about when they talk about speed is what they call layout stability. When you go from page to page, those pages don't bounce around that we do on a traditional website. And users perceive the bouncing around as slow page load. And you know how frustrating it is. You show up to a website, you load it, you're about to tap on that content, or just you're looking at it, and some ad or some banner loads a second later and then pops up above it, and everything shifts down, right? So PWAs are great about having that stuff just kind of load in a more tight fashion, so you don't get the bouncing around. But when you actually measure the speeds of these things, generally speaking, they're not that much faster. And so what you really need to do to solve this problem is make sure the data is kind of already kind of sitting in the browser. It's really a problem with the data in your databases more than it is the front end PWA or something else. I could let me see if there's more questions about PWA or anything else, but I can go a little bit more on that topic.
Sure. I
If it
believe
makes
we
sense.
have one here on one on LinkedIn as well. John Duncan asked a question over here. John, thank you for your question. How does Moovweb fit into the current trends toward headless e-commerce?
Hi, John. Great question, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And if this is the John Duncan from 64 Labs,
It
I'm not
is.
sure he is. Oh, okay. So hey, John, it's I know I can't hear you here, but it's really great for you to be on this and to ask a question. Everyone should check out 64labs.com. John actually is a partner we've been working with for probably 6 or 7 years. They are a great agency that basically will probably launch some of the first PWAs that were out there. And many of them were ones that were powered by the XDN. So we've kind of got a long, early relationship with them on the whole PWA journey. I would definitely recommend that people check them out as well. So I talked about, let me take a step back here. Moovweb's mission is super straightforward. Our aim is to make the entire web instant while making it simpler. So instant and simple. So I've talked a lot about instant, haven't talked a lot about the idea of simple. So headless is this approach that it's a horrible name. I hate the term headless. Headless is it's not something anyone would want. I can't tell you how many times we've got these IT teams who are saying, "Hey, we love headless. We want to go headless. We've been trying to go headless for years." The CIO and CTO and the CEO just keep shooting it down. I'm like, well, first of all, it's why would a CEO ever say, "Hey, the thing that I want you guys to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on is this notion of going headless"? It just doesn't sound attractive. So I think it's a horrible name. It has caught on. Now, the concept is an amazing concept. The idea of taking the front end of the website and separating it out from the back end using APIs to connect it such that your front end, number one, is portable. So these PWAs are headless. You can take your portable front end on Shopify. You can switch to Magento. Often many people in the market are going the other way. They're going from a Salesforce or Oracle, and they're going to a Shopify. But what some companies are doing, they're going headless first. They're going and taking their website headless on the old platform, and then they're keeping that website with all the third-party integrations, and they're swapping out the APIs for a new platform, and they're keeping that website. So it's kind of your portable website to keep no matter who your backend kind of e-com platform provider is. So that's why headless is popular. People are gaining a ton of independence from their platforms, and the second reason people do headless is just it's easier to update only the front end when you only have to worry about the front end separate from the back end. Now, managing a headless front end takes a lot of, you lose a lot of the simplicity of managing something versus when it's what people call a monolithic stack, which is what most people have today. The front end, back end are kind of munched together. And so there is some simplicity to having that stuff munched together, even if there's a lot of issues with that. So what Moovweb does, the second thing we do is we make the process of having a headless front end super simple. What does that mean? Development is easy, and you can do local development with any modern framework. Next, React, Nuxt, there's SAP Spartacus we support, Magento PWA Studio, React Storefront, Vue Storefront. There's a bunch of these headless front ends for e-com and otherwise that are out there. We support all those. We make the local development really easy where all those edge rules are kind of executing locally. So there's development, there's deployment. Our deployments are easy. The rollbacks are simple with one button clicks. The previewing is the next step. So when you want to preview this stuff, you want to make sure that every time you create some new code in your source control, like say on GitHub, there's an automatically generated pre-prod environment. And with us, you can have an infinite number of those. So there's that whole piece of managing a headless front end where every time you create some code, there's a new feature. Why is that important? So your QA people can go check it out without explicitly having to push it. You get a unique URL for every time you push. So maybe something broke on the website. You want to know, the QA person can tell you exactly where it broke because they have a full history, like a time machine that goes back in time and sees exactly how your website was changing. And so that's the previewing of stuff. Then you run it, like I said, it's running across our global network. Then you go and experiment on your website. Let's say you want to run A/B tests. Most A/B testing tools will slow down your website. So the whole point of having a sub-second website, then you go run your first A/B test, and you're back to this really slow website. No one wants that. So it has a full ability for you to be able to experiment on your website, but still have it be instantaneous. And not only can you experiment, you can do something called canary deploys. That's where you launch the new version of your website or new features just to 5% of your users before you turn it up to 100%. So that's the whole idea of experimenting. There's a whole performance monitoring set of dashboards. And the last thing is you want to defend your website. There's people trying to scrape your website with robots. There's people trying to attack your website. So we have all those features to defend your website against all those kinds of attacks as well. So that full life cycle, normally you'd have to go buy lots of little products to do that sort of thing. And for Headless, some of those products don't even exist. We have all those kind of capabilities embedded into one thing to make, essentially coming back to our mission, we're going to make the web completely instant for everyone. And we're going to make it simple, even though people are going toward Headless, which has some complexities. We make all that stuff super simple.
All right, so we've got about 30 minutes left in the stream here, so keep your questions coming. I do have one more in the chat we're going to get to right now, but if you've got something in particular you want us to touch on, just post it in the chat, and we'll be happy to get those answered. Again, a message from our sponsor. If you watch this live stream regularly, you know that I absolutely despise hosting. Everything about it, I just want my software to work. I don't want to have to deal with auto scaling or hosting or databases or any of that nonsense. And that's why we have great partners like Mage Mojo. And I want to thank Mage Mojo for continuing to support these live streams. And so with that, we're going to get into the last question I have in the chat right now from Robin Jones. Robin, thank you for watching. Thank you for the question. What are some of the smaller brands on Moovweb? So, I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. You can give us some examples of smaller brands, but is there a size merchant where your services start to make sense?
Yeah, so look, what we're really excited about is that if you have, generally for sites that have a few $100,000 of revenue, our free tier should work perfectly fine in a production setting. So that's one thing that you should go check out. I don't even know, because we just launched the product in April, I don't even know if the free tier pricing is on our website. But if you're at that lowest level of traffic, usually it's for websites that do, say, $500,000 of revenue or lower. Our free tier may work perfectly fine for you. So absolutely, we go all the way down there for the smallest websites. This sweet spot for a lot of our companies is in that $5 million and higher level. And that's where you start getting into our paid tiers. And we've got hundreds of brands, at that level, going all the way up to sites like, United Airlines does 13, 14 billion online. So there's that whole spectrum of websites going all the way from a couple million of revenue all the way up to the biggest ones. There's some great brands at that call it 5 to 10 million, to 20, and I can't reveal anyone's revenue, but somewhere between the, 2 and 100 million. I mean, you should go check out some really fast websites. I'll tell you some here. Akira.com is a fashion site. I like to bring up fashion sites because they have really big images and rich images. The last thing you want to do is show grainy images if you're shopping for fashion. And so we're not skimping on that side of things. So you should go to shopakira.com.
Spell that for me, Akira.
Yeah, A-K-I-R-A, so shopakira.com. Based in Chicago, an amazing fashion brand. Venus.com is bigger. They're certainly bigger. But they're on that Internet Retailer 500 and close to the top there. Venus.com is a great one. I told you about the Tybar.com. They're a great one to check out. A great Shopify site, if you want to see an instant Shopify site, go to shopplanetblue.com. Actually, let me just check that one. So I must have it here. Yeah, I think it's shop. Yep, here it is. Yep, it's Shop Planet Blue.
Okay.
So you can check it out. And I just want to show you some of this. Let's see if this works here. So here's Shop Planet Blue. I mean, there's rich imagery here. Okay. And every time I tap on something, the point of this is that everything is basically instantaneous. So if you saw that there, if I go to one of these experiences and I tap on that, it's basically an instantaneous load. There's no flicker, and you can't get faster than that, right? So why optimize for speed when you can just jump and go to instant and have it, never have to worry about speed again? So Shop Planet Blue is a great Shopify Plus customer, but there's so many more, and you should check out any of these sites. Most of them should feel unlike any other sort of e-commerce experience that's out there. And then certainly we go up to bigger websites. 800flowers.com has that same type of feeling here, where you tap on something and you basically get that instantaneous feeling. These are really big and rich images. It's the essence of most of these sites is that you've got to have great images if you're going to have people get excited about the site. And one thing I'll share about this is what we're noticing in our data when you have an instant website is that the session times may be the same. If you had a 3-minute session, you tend to have a 3-minute session even when you get an instant site. But the number of products people are able to see in that same session sometimes goes up by as much as 50%. And if you think about it, it's that last product that catches their eye that gets them to buy before they decide to go to someone else's website, not yours, right? So showing more products increases conversion rate, and people are seeing amazing and huge wins in conversion rate because of an instant browsing speed like this. And what we really like to say is that the website gets out of the way. Your products are what people are there to see you for. Kind of like if they come to your stores. If you guys have stores, it's a very visual experience. You're walking around, and if you're looking at fashion, you're looking at maybe 15 things at once. Something catches your eye, you go and look at it. If you go to an e-commerce website and a traditional 5-second or 3-second loading mobile website, every time you make a decision, it's as if the sales rep at the store jumps in front of you for 3 or 4 seconds and asks you, "Hey, are you sure that's what you really wanted?" It'd be a horrible experience, right? So this is doing the best you can do, especially in an environment like this, nowadays, and what we're seeing with where people can't go to stores, is that it's as close as you can get to that rich visual experience that you get when you're shopping at a store. The best you can do on a mobile website or a desktop website. And so speed is so fundamental when it comes to having a great shopping experience, as you well know. And so we definitely go down to some of those smaller websites for sure, and definitely see if you fit in if our free tier isn't on our website yet. I'm not aware if it isn't. You can email us and we'll tell you about it. So there may be a chance you fit in with that free tier.
Tell me about it now. Like what is in the free tier versus a paid tier?
You actually get you pretty much get all the benefits of a sub-second website, whether it's a PWA or traditional website, just a traffic threshold. So I think the cutoff is 50 gigabytes of bandwidth per month. And so if you have less than 50 gigabytes of bandwidth per month, you'll fall into our free tier. And if you do the math on that and look at a typical e-commerce site, it usually corresponds to maybe $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of annual revenue. And so if you're, and it depends. If you happen to have a site with smaller images or less bandwidth, then you may have more revenue than that and still fit in. So that's the kind of main metric there. It's the amount of bandwidth going through it. There's some other thresholds in there, but bandwidth is kind of the main one.
So what happens if I exceed that? If I sign up and I exceed that bandwidth on the 15th of the month, what happens for the next 15 days?
Yeah, so we'll never turn off a website. You can have spikes. You can have huge spikes. You can have someone on Instagram, a celebrity, love your stuff, and you have 30 extra traffic what you thought you would have had. And it's all great because your business is humming. We are going to serve that traffic. We're going to make sure it's sub-second. Your website's not going to go down. We're even going to be shielding your host from all that traffic because of the way our network works. And we'll do that. Now, that is going to kick into some overages. And so there's some overage fees depending on, there's overage fees if you go over the bandwidth allocation. But it's those, when you start exceeding your traffic, that means you're doing a great job running your business and you're going to be happy to pay those fees. And those fees are not going to be, they're not going to break the bank at all. So the details of those fees, I'm not, you'd have to go to our website and ping us and we could walk you through that.
Okay. Got another question in the chat here from Dale LaFountain. Dale, thank you for watching. Thanks for the question. Do you have any examples of non-PWA Magento 2 sites using your service that we're able to see? And again, people come and go throughout this stream. So we touched on that a little bit, but Let's get Dale an answer. Do you have any examples of non-PWA Magento 2 sites?
No, nothing that we can share here. Because we just launched this product very recently, like about a month ago, you're going to see a lot of them soon. What I'd ask you guys to do, if you go to our website, fill out the form, say that you were here, or email Ajay at moovweb.com, AJAY at moovweb.com, or go at moovweb.com and just ask us for that. We'll just send you some of these because we have some that are more of like the demo site and some other things like that we can send to you. And then as soon as these ones start going live, we'll send those to you as well.
Okay. Tashar in the chat says, what do you think about stability support and future for open source headless e-commerce options available for Magento compared to PWA Studio on the other hand? Do you have and I'm going to try to paraphrase Tashar's question here a little bit, but Tashar, if this doesn't answer your question, let me know. There are a lot of PWA options out there. There's React ones, there's Vue, there's Gatsby JS front ends. Like there's all sorts of different front ends. There's almost as many PWA implementations now as there are JavaScript frameworks, it seems. So do you have any opinion on the differences? Maybe Magento specific, maybe not, but just thoughts in general on the differences between those front ends and those implementations.
Yeah, so what's the point of having a PWA? One is to go headless, so you have this portable front end that you can take. You're not kind of locked in. It's something you can take to you no matter what platform you happen to sit on, and gives you a lot of power and flexibility there. Even if you weren't planning to switch, we've had customers who are renegotiating with a certain e-com platform vendor saying, hey, I'm headless now. I just have to put Shopify's APIs in here. And just by virtue of that, they're able to negotiate a better deal during the renewal. So that's one benefit. The second, if you do PWAs right, is website speed. So let's talk about portability. You want to go with an open source portable PWA framework. You probably want to go for that over a, call it, vendor produced one. Both are free, but the vendor produced one is more, it's not really portable. Now, some of them are open source and some with a lot of arm wrestling you could probably bring to a different platform, but they're really built for kind of, for these platform vendors to have a PWA answer, right? Because they kind of got pulled into that and they needed to have something. So I would recommend the ones that aren't natively built into the platform. But there are some benefits to the ones that are natively built in. Number one is that there's a natural API connection and you don't have to go write your own. That said, some of the open source ones, one that you should check out is called React Storefront. If you go to reactstorefront.io, that's a open source React-based PWA framework that has certain connectors to certain platforms. It's got a Magento one, which was just released. So then you get all the benefits. You get the full portability of PWA Studio, and you also have easy integration because you just put in your API key and suddenly all your data is in there. And it's based on React and some things that people really enjoy. Now, the second thing is speed. This is really important. Now, PWAs, it sounds like there's some more technical folks. There's client-side rendering, which is those fast navigations where the client is doing the rendering. And then there's the old websites, which is server-side rendering. Now, the state-of-the-art PWAs do both. The first load is server-side rendered, because that's faster for the first load. And then every subsequent navigation is client-side rendered. So what you want when you go with a PWA framework is you want to go for something called an isomorphic framework. I know this is just a really strange name, but it means that the same page and the same code you write is rendered both on the client and server. You don't have to write two versions of that. You write it in React once, and if it's a first load, it's server-side rendering, and if it's a navigation to that product page, it's going to be a client-side rendering. So definitely pick one of those. Well, which ones are those? The ones you should pick, there's something called Next.js, which is a great framework for PWAs based on React. There's something called Nuxt.js, which is the same thing but based on Vue. Vue's a really popular front-end framework. There's something called React Storefront, which I already brought up with you. That's actually based on Next.js, but it just adds more storefront capabilities, storefront widgets, connectors to e-com platforms. So if you're interested in Next.js, you should probably use React Storefront. Go to reactstorefront.io to check out that one. And then there's one called Vue Storefront, but make sure to go for the latest version of it. It's called Vue Storefront Next, that's based on Vue, obviously. And then underneath it, it's based on something called Nuxt.js. So even though it's called Vue Storefront Next, it's based on something called Nuxt. Nuxt is the isomorphic version of Vue. So what does that mean? If you choose any of those 4 frameworks that I'm talking about, you're going to get something where you get both client and server-side rendering. Why is that important? It's that the first loads are going to be super fast as well. You're not going to get that trade-off where the first load's slower and everything else is, fast. The first load will be fast and the subsequent loads were fast. And Google still likes server-side rendered websites better. They'll say it doesn't matter, but the truth is, if you use their client-side rendered sort of technology, the browser, the crawler that they use, it doesn't crawl your site as frequently, and it could encounter bugs and issues where your content isn't showing appropriately. So you want to have a PWA framework that does server-side rendering. So the challenge with Magento, to come back to the question, is Magento's PWA Studio is not nearly as portable as these other ones. So that's the first challenge. And the second one is it doesn't have server-side rendering. So the first load speeds aren't great. And so you can look at some of those websites. And as I said earlier, all PWAs natively usually aren't much faster. You kind of need a network that speeds it up. But in some cases, you actually may slow down your website by going to a PWA if it doesn't have server-side rendering. And we've seen a lot of big brands actually kind of do that sort of thing. And so they make that mistake. So, we obviously come in and help them and fix that problem. But, you think that you're going to get into PWAs for speed and you end up slowing down your website. I mean, that's kind of the worst of all worlds, right? Because it's a big, expensive project for some of the big companies. Great. Well, great question there.
Yeah, absolutely, Tushar. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, let me know, and we will circle back to it and make sure we get it answered. And keep those questions coming. We do have about 10 to 12 minutes left here in the stream, and we'll definitely we're here to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. So we'll try to make sure toward the end of the show we get to all of those if you post them in the chat. You had mentioned earlier about some of the conversion rate improvements that people have seen by using your service and going to that sub-second page load times. Do you have any particular case studies or any real numbers to share of folks that have converted from not sub-second to sub-second, and what kind of conversion rate improvements you're seeing from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's 2 big benefits to 2 big business benefits. There's a conversion rate increase, and then there's an organic traffic lift. And both of them, and then you can kind of multiply them together, and you've got a even bigger win. So, yeah, I'll happily share some wins. So, one that a very recent one is that Shoe Carnival, one of the biggest online sellers of shoes, they're on Salesforce Commerce Cloud. They went from a average, maybe decently fast website in that 2.5 to 5 second range for their mobile web pages to a sub-second page. They saw a 40% increase to revenue. So you should go to our website, moovweb.com, spelled Moovweb like this, and go to the customer section, and you'll see a case study that I think we just created a few weeks ago when they launched, that shows and talks about some of these wins that are there. So that's an amazing win. Obviously, to come in and launch something for speed and then have a revenue win of that magnitude, 40%, that's a huge, and that's a home run. Now, is that always going to be the case that you just slap on, you get a sub-second website and you get a 40% increase in speed? No, that's not going to be the case all the time. It really varies. Like, you may have a product and a set of products that can only be found on your website and you can't buy them anywhere else. The truth is, speed or any other improvement to your UX in any way may not be the thing. Maybe your product is only found there. Now, you could have the other extreme, like 1-800-Flowers.com, which competes with FTD, ProFlowers, and these other folks, and people are very price sensitive. And they all do same-day delivery. Now, we love 800-Flowers, and we think they have the best products by far, and their delivery is just a lot more consistent than their competitors. But some people in the market say, hey, I'm just going to be shopping for something where I can get something delivered the same day for $40, and that's all I care about. So a site like that, when it goes sub-second, is going to have a material shift in its conversion rate because people are fickle. They're in and out. They realized, oh, it's Valentine's Day today. Uh-oh. There's only a few places you can go to actually get something delivered that same day, and they're one of them. But there's a few other places. So if they don't find the right price or something else, they have hiccups in that experience, they're going to bounce. So companies like that are going to have a way bigger impact. And so they saw an amazing 50% increase to conversion rate when they first went to a sub-second PWA. And they were one of the first companies that did that. They did that, a couple of years ago, and they quoted that number on. That's a number that was something they quoted when they went on stage at Google I/O to talk about that experience that's powered by Moovweb. Organic traffic lift is another big area that you get a win by doing this, because Google now ranks your website in part based on site speed. And they just announced last week that they're going to increase the weighting of speed as part of their rank starting in 2021. And they, for the first time ever, Google actually told you the metrics that mattered. Google is always super vague about these things because they don't want people to game their algorithms. They were super explicit about the different speed measurements that they're going to take into account in 2021 to rank your website. So that's the other win. The other win is coming in here and saying, hey, now someone's searching for something, to go back to the 800 flowers example, Valentine's Day roses, red roses, whatever else. They found that they ranked higher, and I can't reveal the number, but it was double-digit percentage increases to their organic traffic as a result of these speeds. And what ended up happening as a result of that, and the beauty of that is not only they're ranking higher, in a competitive market like theirs, they're getting ahead of their competitors. So their competitors are losing traffic. And if you think of that kind of business, a lot of the profits they earn are through organic traffic. So they started having all-time sort of highs in their stock price because their profits were at all-time highs. Their competitors were at all-time lows to the point where they went bankrupt. And this is an extreme example, because one of their most profitable channels, SEO, they were getting hammered away because of speed. And so their number one competitor actually ended up going bankrupt. So that would be the extreme case of speed winning for you and killing competitors. You're not going to have the same impact there. But, generally speaking, we see people with somewhere between single-digit revenue and conversion rate and organic traffic growth, all the way up to these examples I'm sharing with you, which are, really powerful and examples of the best that you can do when it comes to speed wins. And you can go to our website to get more case studies.
Yeah, and I've linked to your website in the chat on both platforms we're streaming to at this point. So we've just got about 7 minutes left here. I wanted to talk a little bit. Looks like we've got all the questions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about. Are you familiar with the name Jeffree Star?
No.
Okay, beauty YouTuber, creates beauty products, makeup palettes, things like that. Does a release at least once a quarter, it seems. Maybe shorter durations than that, but is on Shopify, and his claim to fame at this point is he completely shuts down Shopify every time he does a launch. So much so that they've gone to queuing people to be able to place your order. And you'll see 30, 40, 50,000 people in the queue at one time, because when he drops it, within an hour, everything's sold. And so you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, no telling how many people hitting a Shopify site at one time and grinding it to a halt, so much so that they basically had to gate it with a queue to even allow people on there to shop. How would you tackle that with your service?
Yeah, look, our service, and Jeffrey should talk to us if he's having that issue there. Our service is going to shield all that traffic, because every time we get a hit, we're not going and doing a database lookup and all that complicated stuff, the kind of stuff that falls over when you get too much traffic. It's a file sitting in Manhattan if the person's buying in Manhattan, in Miami if the person's buying from Miami. It's already sitting there. And so we will shield all that traffic before it gets to Shopify and serve it all perfectly. And we've got, great customers some of whom sell cosmetics and other things, like Revolve Fashion. They're the guys who kind of figured out the whole influencer marketing. So they'll have an influencer, a celebrity of some sort, talk about one of their products. They won't even know that's happening, and it'll happen on a given day. They may have a traffic spike that's like 50 times their normal levels of traffic. They don't even have to know or worry about it or care about it, because they got the Moovweb XDN shielding them in their databases. And so they don't have to know about it. We don't have to know about it. Why don't we have to know about it? We have so many customers on this platform that, a third of Americans every month are hitting hitting a Moovweb powered experience every month. So if one of them happens to have a 50x spike, doesn't matter. If everyone's having a spike like on Black Friday, our infrastructure just scales up automatically. And so we'll have maybe 5 times the servers just automatically scale up on a Black Friday, versus normal, because everyone's scaling. But if any one individual customer is having a spike, it's no problem for us. And we just absorb it, even if we don't know about it, because sometimes these spikes happen over social, and the customer doesn't even know it's going to happen, and they have this huge spike. So yeah, certainly, we should definitely reach out to him if he's having that problem. I'm glad you brought him up.
Hey, bring it up to the marketing team. Go ahead and, send me a nice bottle of whiskey or something if you land the account. All right, so I think that's about it. It looks like we've got all of the questions answered in the chat. I am going to call it a day. It's a long it's a long week and a long month and a very, very long year, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of you. So I'm probably gonna take a little extra time off this Friday afternoon, and I hope everybody out there is able to do the same. Ajay, if you would, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and learn more about Moovweb.
Yeah, just go to moovweb.com. You see the spelling here, and fill out the form. I'll give you my email, ajay@moovweb.com. And look, really appreciate the questions. These are great questions. Site speed's super important. We're here to help. Even if we can't help you, we'll tell you and advise you on what to do. We've got a free offering for folks, for many of you that might have smaller websites. And look, I just really appreciate everyone making time and the great questions here, and hope everyone's safe. Have a great weekend here, and thank you so much, TJ, for having me on.
Definitely my pleasure. Ajay, if you would, hold on. I'm going to roll this in graphic. I didn't go over this with you at the beginning before we went live, but I'm going to roll this in graphic, and then we can wrap up afterwards. But I want to thank everybody for watching this Friday afternoon where I'm at, whatever time of the day it is for you out there. And we've got another fun stream lined up next week. Jay Smith from WebScale is going to come on, and we're going to talk about hosting progressive web apps and what the differences are between hosting a PWA and a traditional website. So join us for that. It should be an event created on LinkedIn, or you should be able to see it on the YouTube channel if you just go to youtube.com/ecommerceaholic. I appreciate you watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.